Questions?
Jim, I just want to, can you hear me?
Yep.
I remember, I guess it was the late 70s or whatever. When I met you, we were on Father Bauer and you were going down the boards and you were skating, but jumping up and your skates were going above the boards.
Yeah.
I just remember, that's what I remember. And we were talking to each other. I think there was a European coach there giving a seminar or something.
Yes.
Anyways, that's when I met you a long time ago.
I used to do all my off-season training on ice because the muscles that you use on skates to go back and forth, if you generate the power and the speed, are the same muscles that you use in skiing. And so to keep myself in prime condition, I would spend all my time on the ice. And because ski jumping has pre-jumping in it, I automatically said I want to be able to pre-jump to the top of the boards, and that's why I was doing it. I don't know if I told you that then, but
I don't know. I just remember you doing that and we were talking to each other.
Well, thank you. Any questions?
Jim, I have one if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. This is unbelievable. Thanks so much for doing this. One of my questions is, have you seen any difference in how the players engage in the activity, thinking about, for example, the nickname exercise or the coaches and parents collaborating on the letter or the sentence to the player? Have you seen any difference that coaches should be aware of in how those players accept that message or engage with that message based on age level, like age? So from very young to older guys, teenagers or adults, whatever it might be, do we need to think a little bit about how we deliver that based on the particular player's age, or is it pretty similar across the board, would you say?
No, the older they get, the more difficult it is. I wouldn't be honest if I didn't tell you that up front. And I will tell you this, that kids born after the year 2000 are different kids than the kids born before 2000. If you look at the generations that we have right now since 1978, it's much easier to work with kids that were born before 2000 than after 2000. And the reason why is because most kids have been raised a different way in that generation. And I mean, I think it's the greatest time in the world to be involved in sport, but it's also going to be a time when you as coaches are going to have to be very much in tune with where the generations are and where they are and where their parents are. Because I find that parents today, I have parents that will sit in my driveway, sit across the street from me, and come over and tell me how to coach because they've seen something on the internet and they think that's what the kid should be doing. And they know nothing about biomechanics. They know nothing about sport physiology. And yet they'll think that because they saw it on the internet, it's what every kid should be doing. So there is a difference. Younger kids, I would say before the age of 14, you can do that exercise with any of them the same way. But once you go beyond that 15 years of age, they start to act like they really know what they're doing. And so I changed it. I told Wally this, that I changed this with junior teams by doing a different exercise with them and focusing more on the development of the athlete individually. And so many times the coaches would ask me, and Wally shocked me when he told me that he would never do this. So I don't know, maybe I'm just an odd duck. But he said most coaches would never have me come in and work with each player individually because the coach wants to maintain the significant importance in the child's life. And I'm not there to teach them how to play hockey. I don't do that. What I do is I work with the kid. And I only got into it with junior teams because I had a team where a coach knew me. He knew what I did. And a kid his brother ended up committing suicide over the Christmas break. And his star player didn't want to play anymore. And he called me and said, "Can you help him?" And I said, "Does he want my help?" And he didn't know. So he said, I'll ask him. So he asked him and he says, well, yeah, okay, I'll talk to him. And I talked to him over the phone for about an hour from my office here. And I talked to him, and he all of a sudden went to his coach after we hung up and he said, can you get him to come here? And I went there and I suddenly realized that there were a lot of players affected by this kid who committed suicide. And so I ended up working with the individual players in helping them build their own identity on an individual basis, but always in concert with the coaches.
Yeah.
I never worked against the coaches, or, you know, I had nothing to do with whether or not they should, you know, if they started talking to me about my ice time, or, you know, why doesn't he let me on the first line? I'd say, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to get you emotionally in the right place so that when you step on the ice, at the drop of the puck, you are ready to play.
Yeah.
And that's the way I did it with each one of them. And then we would come together when each one of them had decided on maybe what they wanted to be known as or what their nickname was. Some of them didn't. Some of them wanted to keep their names. And they would between themselves start doing it. But I would say, this is how you talk to each other.
Yeah.
So that's the way I did it with the older teams.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. That really, I really do see that as you describe it that way, as the common thread. You know, even though they might take to it in slightly different ways based on age, the common thread is the identity,
Yeah.
like the formation of the new positive identity, which I would really agree with. I definitely see that players coming from previous teams or previous coaches or their parents or whatever, there are so many negative thoughts relating to their identity that whatever the exercise is, changing that identity and reframing it into something more positive, I can really see the power in that.
What got me into doing this was the research that I keep on kids. Every kid that I ever did, I had certain questions that I asked, and every kid got those questions. And the two shocking questions that blew me away and to this day surprise me are these. I would say to a kid when I would meet him the first time and start to work with him, I would say, all things being equal, if you had to play for the same coach next year, would you play for him? And if it was at the beginning of the season, the athlete would say yes. It was 93% of them would say yes. But if I asked that same kid at the end of the season, only 3% would say yes.
Oh my God, wow.
And I would, you know, this blew me away so much that I would say, why? And I guess the best story I have is about a kid that was playing in Saskatchewan. He was playing AA midget. He wanted to play junior. He wanted to be 1 year in junior hockey. He came and trained with me it took him 2 years. And he ended up playing for the Kelowna Rockets. And he made the team, and he went all the way to the Memorial Cup. And when he got home, I said, so what about next year? And he said, only if I could go somewhere else.
Wow.
And I said, why? And he says, I won a Memorial Cup, but I never got to contribute. And the coach didn't even know I was there.
Hmm.
And, you know, coaches don't realize that the identity of the athletes today that you're working with, you think about it, a kid born after the year 2000 that is now playing, well, he would be almost too old to play junior anymore. But if you're playing with a kid that was born in 2002, 3, 4, and he's playing for you, he is raised in an entitled environment. He was raised with everybody saying, you're wonderful, you're special, you're important, you're the best. And they haven't done anything. They haven't even accomplished anything yet.
Yep.
And so when they come to you and you all of a sudden have to be very careful with what you do and how you do it, because you can crush their little spirits. You know, you can have a kid. I worked with kids that absolutely couldn't function if they had a coach that was hard on them. And coaches didn't even know that because most of them don't even have the time to deal with it. And I would come in and help this kid, and I would say, look he's asked you to do a little thing and you're not giving it everything you've got. How is he ever going to ask you to do a big thing? And I remember a kid named Joel Broda, who his parents sent him to me from Prince Albert. I mean, I thought the first week I'd killed him because he would start crying when we'd start to work hard. But he went on to be drafted by the Washington Capitals and completely changed him. And he ended up playing for a coach that was just a bully all the time. And kids born after the year 2000, they don't have the spirit you and I have. They don't have what you and I had. The environment's completely different. And so you have to show them that they can grow, and you have to show them that you know how to help them grow so that they inside have the integrity to grow on their own. You know, I mean, I wish I could say that I had coaches that helped me, but I had one coach. And I've just written a book called One Kind Thing, and it's all about the people that helped me in my career. And what's really funny is I went back and interviewed or wrote or phoned all 831 people in my journals that helped me in my career. Now, some of them I couldn't reach because they were dead, or I never met them personally. They were just presidents of companies and they supported me financially. But the people individually, the 227 individuals, and I narrowed it down to 52. And I went back to my national team coach. And I went to France and I took my camera and I set it up, and I was going to do this interview, and I looked at him and I said, Gilbert, I sent you the questions in advance. I said, is there anything on here you don't want to deal with? You don't want to answer? And he goes, no. He says, this is great. But he says, I think you're wrong. And I said, why? And he says, I never taught you anything. And I went, what? I said, sure you did. And he said, I didn't teach you anything about skiing. I taught you how to ride a bike. I taught you how to train in the mountains. But he says, when you came to me, you were on the team at 16 and you had already won the national championships and beat all these guys that were 27, 28, 29 years of age. I went, this kid's 16. He's got lots of time. And I just never bothered to teach you. And he said, I owe you an apology. And I found that true of most coaches that I had, except for one, Larry Nellis. Larry Nellis was the only guy that reached me. And you know how Larry reached me? Emotionally. So I understand this whole concept of how do you take a kid that is privileged, is entitled, has been told he's good, he's great, and he hasn't done anything yet. And when I train kids, that's where I start. And it's funny, I've never hurt a kid, and I've never had a kid quit. And they beg me to stay. They want to stay, and they want to be with me because I know to reach them emotionally first so that they can see their growth and their potential. Then all of a sudden, they feel like they can do something. And, Joel Broda, he probably called me every second night that first year he played junior. And we would do a Skype call like this. And, he would call me and ask me. I had Olympic athletes that would call me from the Olympic Games, and I had worked with them, and they would call me and say, my head's a mess. What do I do? And I would say, tell me what emotions you're feeling. Which one's winning? See, we believe the lies we tell ourselves. Gentlemen, if you think about it, you never get in trouble technically. You never get in trouble physically. You never get in trouble tactically. You always get in trouble emotionally. If you have a fight with your wife, it's emotions. It's not about sex. It's not about what you eat. It's an emotional thing. Somewhere you've missed what she was trying to say, and she missed what you were trying to say. And it's always emotional. With a child, it's always emotional. And I've practiced this and studied this till, as I said to Wally, I have 631 different emotions, and they're split into positive, neutral, and negative. And I group them together in groups, and I take a word like integrity, which is in the truth model. Because if you don't tell yourself the truth, you can't be honest. And if you're not honest, you can't have integrity. And so if you lie to yourself about your training and say, I'm going to go running, and then you don't do the run, or you don't do all of it, or you don't do it to the best of your ability, you're now lying to yourself. And the minute you start lying to yourself, you're sabotaging your measurement of your commitment to what? To growth. And so I get kids to measure those 5 things all the time. I make them journal all the time. You know, my mother taught me all about journaling, and I had to learn it because I had no memory. After my brain concussion, I couldn't remember what I was supposed to do. And I have books of journals behind me here on the wall, you know, since I was 12 years of age. I've never stopped journaling because I wanted to do research on kids. And I've researched Olympic athletes, 552 of them. And the crazy thing is, every one of them was raised by parents that were intentional. And that is a hard word for parents of kids today born after the year 2000. Being intentional is very difficult for parents and coaches to be that way. And you know, my dad was intentional. You've heard his story. But you know what? Everything was a game. He turned everything into a game. I remember the first time I wanted to play catch with him. I wanted to play ball with him. And I would throw the ball, and what happens when a kid throws the ball when they're about 6 years of age? It goes way over there. And he'd have to run and get it. And he very quickly, he knew right away what he was going to do. So he said, come here, son. He said, stand here. And he measured out the distance from the pitching mound to home plate. And then he closed the doors on the Quonset. And the center doors, he painted a square, which would have been the strike zone. And he says, I'm going to be inside working on the equipment. You throw the ball and catch it when it bounces back. When it would hit the door and it didn't hit the center post, it would drop right there, and I'd have to run and get it. But when it hit the center post, it would bounce right back because the center post was solid. And all of a sudden, one day he came out and he said, let's play catch. And I figured out what he had done. He was inside. He could hear that out of 50 throws, 40 of them hit the center post, and he knew that he didn't have to chase the ball anymore. But that's how he turned everything into a game. When we built the rink the first time, he made it out of the thinnest plywood possible and said, who's going to shoot a puck through the plywood first? Yeah, can you imagine how many shots I took trying to go through that plywood? And the minute one of us put the puck through the plywood, he said, okay, boys, time to rebuild the rink. And we would have to tear all the plywood off and put new plywood on. And he would only go one size thicker each time because everything was a game to make you grow. And he turned it into a game. And then there'd always be rewards that would come with it. And that's how you've got to work with kids today. I don't know if that helps, gentlemen, but I know that's what works with the kids I work with.
That's tremendous. Thanks, Jim. Great stuff.
Any other questions?
Jim, before you've been fading out on me quite a bit. I'm looking forward to getting the recording. I'm still going to be 34. I'm going to be sending a notice and I was going to text all of you, but part of the Skype for me will be your own personal takeaways from this that I think it would be worth you sharing.
Yes, I would love that feedback.
Yeah, and I'll record that for Jim, and you know, I know I texted Jordan when he was talking because I've heard all the stories and they're almost unbelievable. But
did any of you text me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just going to turn my phone on.
Close to you is Haley Wickenheiser. So I'm looking forward to continued conversations with you, particularly about that exercise and the chairs and the parents and engaging them. I'm curious, Barry, about your takeaway on how the POE program with parents quite often being distractions at those.
Okay. Okay, I love your comments here, and they're predictable. I have done that exercise I did with you at the beginning 2,069 times. And I've never had the answer I'm looking for. And that is personal development of my emotional balance. You know, as one of you wrote here, the time to focus and execute the specific task at hand. Players, commitment to the task, specifically avoidance of distractions, interferences. See, if you have a child that has self-control, they will come prepared. They won't show up unprepared. They won't show up ready to play, not to play. But don't feel bad. I've done this test 2,069 times. One of the other guys that was supposed to be on this, Claudio Berto, who's a ski coach who's been coaching, he had me come and do this the very first time I did it for his ski club. And we asked them what they needed to be their best. And they put down things like money, coaching, training, better equipment, more money. And I've never had anybody ever focus on emotional balance and building an emotional foundation. Because if you're the coach, you have to have your emotions trained to know how to respond to people that are emotional, because you're in a game that you can't play without emotions. And your players get in trouble because they don't know how to control their emotions. So this is valuable for me. Thank you so much.
Jim, did you say you work with coaches specifically with the same kind of stuff?
Very few did, a few, but most of them didn't because they, well, I'll just say it. Most of them thought I was wacky. Most of them thought, I don't play hockey. I'm not a hockey coach. I'm not a hockey player. So why are we talking to him? And, I am an oddball, and I'm totally comfortable with it because I know that what I do now. Ski coaches will call me all the time, but hockey coaches and coaches in sport, and I've coached kids to Olympic levels in 19 different sports, and I've never taught them the sport, but they've made it to. I have a girl that won the world championships in skeleton, and I didn't teach her how to slide down the hill. I know nothing about it, but she was an emotional mess. And of course I got her physically in condition, and physical is important. But my dad taught me this, is that he would take his hands, like, oh, I'm holding them here. And he would say, your foundation down here is your emotional balance. Number 2 is mental focus. Number 3 is physical preparation. Number 4 is skill development. And number 5 is tactics and tools. And this is you. And if you don't have those ready, you're not ready for this. And this side over here is relationship. If you can't get along with people, then 9 times out of 10, you can't get along with people. You can't play with the team because your emotions are out of control. And if your emotions are out of control, then you can't build a family. You can't build that identity, that cohesiveness. So all of these go together. Then he would say, the business of the business you're in. Your brain tells you how to think. You've got to know the business of the business you're in. If you don't know the sport of hockey, right? Every kid that came to my camps, when I would train them, I would give them the rule book for hockey. And I would say, have you ever read the rule book? And they go, no. I've never had a kid who ever read the rule book. Yet one of the greatest hockey players in the world would read the rule book every year, Wayne Gretzky. I had to know the rule book as a skier because there were FIS rules. I had to abide by those rules. Number 3, physical preparation. This one is money. And you'd say, what does money have to do with physical? It has to do with the fact that you can only earn so much per hour with your body unless you work with your brain. And you need money to do whatever you're doing. Then this one is teams, is technical. And here you have a team, and you need to know what your role is on that team and where you fit and what your role is. And then finally up here is what we call forerunner or leadership. If you're not the leader on your team, then you better get to work. You need to be the guy that inspires everybody on your team. And every player can play that role if they look at what they do well. And that goes with tactics and tools. And Dad would put his hands together and say, Mark, when you've got those 10 things in place, you've got a grip on life. And you can handle life. And he was adamant about teaching us that by the time we reached puberty. You know, I knew how to weld, I knew how to acetylene, I could drive any farm equipment, I could change bearings. I mean, there wasn't anything on the farm I couldn't do by the time I was 13 years of age. Do you think my dad worried about me going to Europe? Not at all. You think he had any worries about me getting in trouble ski racing on the World Cup circuit at 16? Not a chance. Because I was ready. And I say this is where you have to look at, you know, when I work with a kid, I start with the parents and I interview the parents, and I can always tell what kind of kid I've got as soon as I hear the parents talk. Because as soon as you hear a parent talk, you can tell exactly what kind of a kid you're going to have by the way they talk about their son or daughter. So I always start with interviewing the parents first. I know that's odd. It doesn't, you know, I'm an odd duck. I know that. People don't maybe understand why I'm so weird that way, but I love kids. I love working with kids. I love working with parents, and I love working with coaches. You know, my goal in life is to be able to field a full Olympic team before I die, and we never done that. You know, it's kind of crazy to think about, but we have so much opportunity and so few kids and parents and coaches that are trying to get their kids to that level, because we've never even come close to fielding a full Olympic team. Not even close. There's so many events and there's so many opportunities, but kids are just not prepared. Anyway, that's a personal goal that I have. Anything else? I don't want to keep you all night, so
Well,
I hope this is valuable. I hope this helps.
Jim, I think it was terrific. Much appreciate you taking the time to do that and to
Thank you.
kind of to let us in on that. Now, you've been doing this for a living for a period of time?
Yeah, I farmed with my dad and my brother until 1997. And then my father decided to turn the farm over to my younger brother. And I came back to Calgary and didn't know what I was going to do. And I had done a speech in the spring of 1997. And I've been making a living primarily speaking and teaching excellence in the workplace to businesses and companies, because that's where the money is. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I always ended my speeches with the same presentation. I would say, and I had done 2,069 speeches to that point, and I would end them by saying, this is a picture of my mom and my dad, and they're two of 831 people that gave me $2.2 million worth of support in my years of ski racing, and without them, I couldn't have done it. And if any of you want help or want to grow or want to learn, here's my phone number, here's my email, here's my address. Come and see me, phone me, or show up at my front door or write me a letter. And I would get the occasional letter from parents that would ask a question, but that was it. And then in the spring of '98, this 17-year-old kid rang my doorbell, and I said, "Can I help you?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm here to train with you." And I said, "Do you have your plan?" And I had, in my speeches, I always told him to come with a plan. And I have meaning for every word. PLAN has meetings. And I said, have you got your plan? And he says, right here. So, you know, he gets a stroke for that one because he was ready. And I said, do you have videotape of your playing? Yep. And I said, okay, let's talk about what your true goals are. And I started by looking at his goals and told him that his goals were all wrong. And you need to set your goals right because you don't have the right goals. And I said, let's test you. And I tested him and we went to work. And most of you may know him because 19 and a half weeks later, he was asked to try out for the Calgary Flames as a walk-on. And he never got to go because he had not opted in or out of the NHL draft. I was trying to get him to a junior team because that's what he told me he wanted to do. And he ended up signing with the Edmonton Oilers. And from there, the next year, 11 kids showed up at my door. And then the year after that, I had 40 kids showed up at my door.
Jim, can you tell us Jimmy the Colleton story? Because I think it relates. He worked with Jeremy Colleton in junior hockey. I think, you know, with.
Yeah, I worked with Jeremy after he had already played in the NHL. I didn't work with him as a junior.
Okay,
he came to me. He came to me when he was with the Islanders, and I had spoken out at where's he from? Blackie, or there was some minor hockey team out south of Calgary.
Yeah, Blackie. He's on a farm.
Yeah, and I believe his dad was there, and his dad told him about me. And he called me and he says, do you take NHL kids? And I said, I'd love to. But I said, you got to remember, I have a lot of kids at the age of 8 all the way to 28 training with me. So I said, I will try and be respectful and slide you in with somebody like Haley or other NHL guys or other junior guys. So you're always with guys that are your same weight and size and so on. And I tested him, and I apologize because I really don't want people to say that I said this about Jeremy Colleton, but I have my own standards of testing. And he was not fit enough to play junior hockey. He was so talented and so gifted. But in my testing, he wasn't fit enough. And when he saw my results, and I pointed out that mentally, he was operating at about 33%. On efficiency, on the emotional side of it, he was operating at 11%. And physically, he was operating at around 68%. I said, you're not fit enough to play in the NHL. And that didn't shake him. He said, let's go to work. And we went to work. And the next year he went, and he was one of the fittest guys there. And he was one of the toughest guys there. But I would always, with every kid, I always keep track of where their emotional hangup is. I call it the glass ceiling they're willing to break, not break. And every time I would point to that thing, he would say, I'll come back next week and we'll do it. Or, let's do it tomorrow. Or let's do it next time. And for 2 years, he avoided it. He just wouldn't deal with it. And I saw him struggle. And every athlete that has, when I pinpoint what they really need and they don't face it, then that's pretty well as far as they can go. But if they face it and break that ceiling and break through that, then they come to a whole new level of performance. And out of 1,013 kids, I've had 112 that have broke their ceilings. Only 112. And it was amazing to see some of them go places. I think my favorite story is Mike Marshall. Mike Marshall had a mother that was only 5'6", and his dad was about 5'3", I think. And Mike was short, and he came to me when he was 11. And he was playing Community 5, I think, if I remember right. And in that one summer, he went up to try out, and the organizer of the evaluations said, you're ready to go, Mike. Would you come out and help me set up the pylons and the pucks and all that kind of stuff? So Mike goes out with them and he helps them set it up. And they go through the whole practice. And through the whole practice, this evaluator is just making him get the pucks and move the pucks and get the pylons and move the pylons. And the evaluation is over, and Mike turns around to this guy and he says, "When do I get to go?" And he said, "What do you mean?" He says, "When do I get to go?" He said, "I was supposed to be evaluated." And he says, "I haven't done any of them." And he said, "You're too good for these kids. You don't belong here." And, Mike was chosen by Hockey Canada, if any of you know him, and went to, I believe, Välimäki in Finland. And he took the advanced coaching courses, and he's now one of the top coaches. But the thing about Mike is that Mike got it right away and said to me at about 13 years of age, "I never will play in the NHL. I'm only 5'4". I don't have the speed, and I know that. But he says, "I'm here for the next number of years you'll keep me, because I want to be a great coach." And he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And he's going to be a great coach someday if he keeps coaching. I don't know if he will, but, I had many kids that would surprise me with how they would all of a sudden get it. And I've told Wally this many times, the kids that had skill, they're the hardest ones to reach, because they think they have all the tools. And the kids that have very little skill are the ones that make them the most progress if you reach them. I feel like I killed you.
No,
I'm
this is great stuff.
hoping somebody made a lot of good notes, because I'm having trouble remembering all this stuff.
It's all recorded, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but can you read there, TJ?
Slowly.
Put
You're
it
a
in jail.
defenseman.
Hey, it's good to see you, Rick. Your microphone isn't on.
You're right. I said, good to see you too.
Yeah. Rick and I had the good fortune to work together when he was coaching in Strathmore, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me come out there.
I think it goes the other way, Jim, as you may recall.
Well, I think you made me look good.
Yeah.
I worked with Jeremy when he was two of those spring teams.
Yes.
His dad got me, him and Mason Raymond's dad got me to, and I said I'd only coach if we practiced a lot. So we were both, we went 10 weeks and 4 90-minute practices each weekend.
Yep.
So I had them like 120 hours on the ice.
Yep.
In those kind of golden years. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well,
I always thought he should have been a defenseman.
He was a tremendous player, but he really struggled mentally with getting past the belief that he actually belonged there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that. And he would never point to it. And I would say, "Let me help you." But he wouldn't face it. So, and I think he'll be a tremendous coach. I have no doubt about that, because he was very smart. I don't know if you saw that, Tom, but he was very smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, those guys. Well, Terry helped me with that. TJ helped me on the ice and the practices with those guys.
Okay. And now, Dan, you coach the Victoria Cougars?
Now the Royals.
Oh.
So yeah, when the Cougars left, there was a little bit of an absence in Vic for a while as far as the Western League goes. They'd had the junior A team, but then the league expanded in 06 with Chilliwack coming in. They were the Bruins at the time. And then the Bruins moved to Victoria and became the Royals. They've been here for about 8 years now.
And is there support there when you're playing?
It's been great, actually. Yeah, a tremendous fan base. Yeah.
Because I worked with one of the teams on the island. I think it was the Nanaimo team.
Yep.
And boy, they had a tough time getting fans sometimes when I would go out there. So.
Yeah. No, Victoria's been surprisingly good. Really good balance of demographics. There's some older population. There's a young service industry and tech sector. The students are here as well. A lot of new young families. It's actually been really good.
Good.
Jim,
Well,
so Jim, you've gone into the Medicine Hat Tigers. Have you worked with other junior teams, major junior teams?
I worked with the Raiders, the Prince Albert Raiders.
Okay.
I worked with the Moose Jaw Warriors. I worked with um, the Tigers. I did the most work with the Tigers and the Raiders. And the Raiders were the team that had the player whose brother committed suicide. And then Willie he had heard about me, and I had asked him to come and speak at my summer camps. And he came and spoke to the kids at we used to have 70 kids there, so he came and spoke one day after supper. And he watched what we were doing, and I don't know, something must have caught his eye. And they were the bottom of the basement when he called me on the 2nd of November. They were in last place in the Western League. And he said, I need you to come. And I said, I'm booked right up until, I believe it was the 23rd of November. But I told him that when I was invited to come and speak to teams, and I found this often with junior teams, and I've worked with many of the tier 2 junior teams, more of them than the WHL. But when I would go and speak to them, the players almost have the attitude of, oh no, another speaker. Okay, forget it. And so I always tactically think about how can I get the best emotional response before I speak. And so I called minor hockey, and I talked to Willie, and I said, can we raise money for minor hockey and at the same time make the Tigers look like heroes in the community? And he said, I'm up for it. But I said, when I speak, it'll be to your team. But it'll be the same for the parents. But I'm going to hit on all the things that aim towards the team. And the Tigers came, they were in the front row, across the front, they were signing autographs, and we had a lot of fun and gave away door prizes and all of that kind of stuff. And then I got up to speak, and I spoke, and there was a big question and answer period of time. And I didn't get out of there till 11 o'clock. The Tigers had left, and Willie had left, and all the players had left, but the parents didn't want to leave. And I packed up about 11 o'clock, and I was driving back to Calgary, and I was just about, I think, at Brooks when the phone rang, and it was Willie. And he said, the captain called and said, can you get Jim back? We want to talk to him. And so I turned around and came back, stayed overnight, and the next morning went into the dressing room. And I talked to them, and I said, what do you think your challenges are? And I just wanted to hear what they would say and how they would voice it, because I can tell when, you reveal more about yourself by what you say than you do about the thing you're talking about. And so, I pretty well know what somebody's saying when they say it and where it's coming from. And I said, okay, let me talk it over with Willie. I think I have a plan. And Willie said, okay. So we talked with the coaches, and he said, let's do it. And I came back with all my equipment, and I tested them, every player, 60 tests on each player. And when I got finished, I said, Willie, I dare not tell these players what my results tell me. They're not physically able to perform at this level. But I said, that's between you and I. And I'm going to tell them what they need to hear to start to change their mind. And we developed a program for them that we did together every week on the physical side to coincide with and work in conjunction with their practices and their games. And then on the days when they were available without a game or a practice, we would do the emotional and psychological stuff. And they went all the way to the Memorial Cup. They went from last to the Memorial Cup. They got beat by Kelowna, if I remember right, that year. But it was a complete turnaround, and it was a change. And I think the thing that surprises me the most is when I look back at that team, I was telling Wally this, that there are 8 players that played in the NHL for 8 years off of that team. I don't know if that's a big number, but I don't know any other junior teams that had 8 players from one team that played in the NHL. So, and I mean, I was telling Wally this. I do an eye test for most players to see, what they can see. And I came into the dressing room and I said, okay, I want to know if there's a guy on the ice here that gets knocked down all the time. And the whole team started laughing. They were just killing themselves laughing. And they were going like this, pointing to the kid and saying his name. And he was sitting there embarrassed with his head down. He didn't want to look. And Willie looked at me and he says, so what's that about? And I said, what wing do you play? And he said, I play right wing. And I said, Willie, you need to put him on the left wing. And he said, why? And I said, well, I tested him and this is his peripheral vision. This hand is almost straight ahead and this hand was out here. So I said, when he's playing on the right side, he can't see anybody coming. And the only way he can see them is to turn. And I said, if you put him on the other side, because he can see well on this side, he'll be a different player. And he became one of their better players that year as soon as he switched sides. And all we did was see his peripheral vision was wrong. And that's one of the things that is, I test a lot of things. I do a funny test. I make them park a car. If they have a driver's license, they have to park a car. Because your best athletes know how to park a car. Your worst athletes don't. And I know it sounds like a crazy test, but if I ask a guy to parallel park, I can tell you right away which guys are better athletes. Because they're aware of their space. They know where they are. I do a lot of funny tests, but we didn't do that with the Tigers. I thought that would be too embarrassing.
But I'm hearing, and Terry and I coached with Willie for, I think, 6 years at UFC.
Yes.
And I think that is tremendous growth for Willie too. Because we were there just when he started coaching, eh?
Okay. Yeah. I was telling Wally this is that I don't remember Willie being around. Like, I mean, he was there, but and I still have all the results of all the scores of all the players. And, and I look at those results every once in a while. I see them on my files, and I've got files on 1,013 kids. And, I look at the file and I still can't believe how weak some of those kids were that were playing on his team. And, I mean, I remember saying to Willie, and maybe he knew this, he was just being coy or quiet about it, but I said, Willie, the limbs are only as strong as the core, as the trunk of the tree. And I said, the trunk of your trees of all your players is so weak that they're children. The arms and the legs can't work if the trunk isn't solid. The trunk has to be solid. And if you have a kid that has a weak lower back or weak abdominals, and by that I don't mean just how many sit-ups he can do, because that's probably one of the poorest measurements, but the limbs are only as strong as the trunk. So we started a program right away to strengthen their stomachs and their backs. Well, gentlemen, I think we should probably call it unless you have other questions, but I don't know how long you go. Wally, how long do you want to go?
Well, I've been fading in and out. I've missed half of the talk, so
Sorry.
I don't know. Something's wrong with my system. But when you were talking about the trunk of the tree, that Howie Draper's girls drew of his tree. He went to the exercise.
You're in and out, Wally.
You're cutting in and out, Wally. We can't hear you.
Roots to me, to you talk is.
Yeah,
You got to pay your phone bill, Wally.
Yeah. Pay your bill, Wally.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. But
yeah. Gentlemen, call me anytime. You have my number, you have my email. And, Canada, when I think about the fact that Canadians gave me $2.2 million worth of support, by the way, if you prorate that to today, it's $13 million. So that's how much support I was given. And you think about the miles that I traveled and the places I got to go. I think I'm the most blessed man in the world. And I do this for a living. I don't do it for nothing. I do it for a living. But when somebody wants to learn or wants to know more, I try to help as much as I can. And I speak and coach and teach because I love sport, and I love the fact that it's, like I said, it's the last arena where you have to be honest about it to do it. So.
Before we close, I have, as Jim alluded to, a fairly in-depth relationship with Jim for more than a few years, but in 1 year in particular, and he's every bit as dedicated and effective as you may have got the impression that he is here. I can speak from personal experience.
Thank you, Rick.
Right on. Well, I'll just say thanks again, Jim. Very much appreciated. It was an eye opener and
Anytime.
lots of good stuff.
Where are you, Terry?
Calgary.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I know where Dan is.
Jerry?
Jordan, where are you?
I'm in Chestermere. Actually, had you out to speak to our students at Chestermere High School a few years ago.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. And Tom, where are you?
I'm in Calgary, and I'm
Okay.
coaching the state women's team.
Okay.
And Terry is helping me if we do have a season.
Okay. And I don't know this gentleman, Midori.
Barry.
Yeah, yeah. I'm from Spruce Grove.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
It
have
was,
I have a funny story to tell you about that area. I got invited up there to do a thing called Road to the Rings. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Yeah.
And the first year I went, all the mothers showed up with their kids. And we did it for 3 days. And by the third day, all the dads showed up and no mothers. and I did it for 4 years in a row. And they had to keep renting a bigger place. One of the things that I try to do with teams like yours that you're working with, if you have teams, is I try to use me as a fundraiser. In other words, think of a way to get people to come to something where they can be motivated, inspired, and entertained, and at the same time help your team financially, because that way everybody benefits. And so if you ever have a fundraiser idea or a fundraiser you want to do, if you've done the typical fundraisers and they're always the same, think of a different idea of having somebody come and motivate them. And at the same time, then we work with the players. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Great night too. Thanks for sharing. It was exceptional.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thanks as always, Jim.
Anytime.
That was great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
much
you.
appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much.